For what has felt like a year of constant delays and disappointments, we have finally reached the golden quarter. From new games consoles going head to head to be the most sold by Christmas, to video games fighting for their time on our TV screens. This has been the moment that so many of us have been holding out for in 2020. But of all the massive video games being released right now, there's been one in particular which I've been most excited about, and that is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The last entry into the Assassin's Creed series, which was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, really left a sour taste in my mouth and really damaged my relationship with the series. If you haven't already watched my video, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is an Assassin's Creed, make sure to check it out, as I explain in length as to why I don't like that game and why it didn't fit into the Assassin's Creed world. Going into Valhalla, I felt extremely dubious as to whether this would be a triumphant return to the core experience of Assassin's Creed, or just an evolution of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, with very little care for the pre-existing lore and gameplay mechanics. Earlier this year, I made a video titled Assassin's Creed Valhalla will be my final Assassin's Creed. And in that video, I outlined my reservations and also my predictions for Valhalla, and explained why I was ready to walk away from the franchise if Valhalla did not meet my expectations of an Assassin's Creed game. After spending 50 plus hours with the game and completing its main story, I am ready to give my verdict on this game, and tell you by the end of this video if this has been a bittersweet farewell to a franchise I have loved for over 10 years, or a saving grace from Ubisoft that has reinvigorated my love for the franchise. I'm TJFL. Make sure to drop a comment and subscribe if you're new to the channel. This is my review of Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
If I had any pity, I would not lavish it on this poor fool. You forced my hand. Yes, the cost of disrespect is death. You said it yourself. All he demanded, you gave him. That should be enough. I had no need for one so fragile in my hall of heroes. He fought for what he believed in. Does that not count for something?
We will not fail again, Eivor.
Fouquet is a curator of objects of great worth, one of which may reveal my true nature.
True nature? You said this was about victory, about defeating Idrin. It was your plan all along, yet you saw fit to keep me guessing through your fits of madness.
You are not always to be trusted. Your passions overcome you. I know that. My father knew that. Your father knew it.
Thomas said I would find you here, Lee. What's your plan?
Valhalla takes place in the year 873 and thrusts you into the shoes of Eivor, who is a Norse Viking who lives with his clans in the snowy mountains of Norway. After an action-filled opening, you and your brother Sigurd decide to set sails for warmer shores in the beautiful country of England. And my god, the first thing you'll notice is that this game is massive and just downright beautiful. When you first set sight on England, it has an immediately inviting warmth to its look, and the artistic design of the vegetation and small villages are so truly detailed that it's hard to imagine that the rest of the game could have this much attention to detail in its world. But as you slowly begin to explore more of the 17 regions in England, it's actually insane how each area can feel vastly different, yet still have so much attention to that detail. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was also a massive map for you to explore, and most of it just felt like wide empty spaces, with everything feeling very copy and paste. Valhalla's England has so much variation between each region that it begs you to explore every tiny detail of its map. Not even trees dotted throughout the woodlands look copy and pasted, each with their own characteristics and uniqueness setting them apart. Each region feels like it has its own identity as well. From the crowded streets of London having large buildings all squeezed together so that you can navigate across rooftops, to the region of East Anglia with vast open plains with rolling clouds casting shadows down on farmers' huts and Roman remains for you to explore. At no point during my time playing this game did I get a sense of deja vu when entering new regions, and even up to my final hours in the game, I was still left in awe at just some of the landscapes I could see from viewpoints. But England isn't the only land that you'll explore in Valhalla. Norway is also a fairly large map with its glacier mountains and iconic northern lights, and you can easily spend more than 15 hours just exploring this region alone. But even on top of Norway and England, there are another 3 locations that you get to explore during your time in Valhalla, which again have their own uniqueness and identity that set them apart from pre-existing maps. What would usually be served up as expansions in other games are in Valhalla on day 1, which is such a massive win for us as gamers, as we are getting more than our money's worth with these 5 massively detailed locations. Assassin's Creed Valhalla really shakes up the formula for progression in an open world RPG. I hated Odyssey's approach to progression, as you were effectively forced to play as side content and constantly collect new gear, as the main missions and enemies were level gated so that you couldn't advance further in the story due to an arbitrary number dictating your skill level. Luckily, Valhalla changes the way it approaches the leveling system. Instead of being restricted by a number, you now have an overall power level which indicates your character's overall ability and is more of a measure of how likely you are to tackle an objective with ease. Whereas Odyssey forced you to constantly collect new gear, Valhalla incentivizes you to stick to a favourite weapon or armour piece, which you can then upgrade over time, which will alter its appearance and stats. This made my time so much more enjoyable, as I was able to stick to a loadout not only I liked the appearance of, but also suited my playstyle best. The skill tree this time around is more like a maze in itself for you to navigate yourself around. Set out amongst a cluster of stars, you use your skill points to increase Eivor's stats along the skill tree, until you get to a new skill which you can then unlock. I really like this new system, as it encourages you to commit to unlocking a skill path, and discover what other skills might come from that. By the end of my playtime, I had unlocked 34 skills, and each one had a significant effect on my playstyle, and constantly kept the skill tree rewarding, even up to the final hours. How skill points and armour pieces are rewarded to you are mainly from exploring the world, but unlike previous Ubisoft games, where the map was just full of clutter and unclear guidance of what content rewarded loot or XP, Valhalla breaks it down simply into 3 categories. The first category is wealth. Wealth rewards you with currency, which can be used to upgrade your settlement or to purchase items from shops. Wealth also gives you your armor pieces and weapons, and even new abilities. In most cases, wealth is locked behind fun but puzzling environmental puzzles. These can range from finding an alternative way into a building, to scouting the nearby area for a key to unlock the door. No puzzle tends to take longer than a few minutes to solve, but some can be head scratching at a first glance. The added layer of these mini puzzles made collecting and looting gear much more fun and intriguing, and less of a mundane task, which was definitely the case in Odyssey. Books of knowledge are your unique abilities that you can map to your triggers, and these are also found scattered across the world behind puzzles, giving you a reason to explore the world even more to increase Eivor's arsenal of abilities. The second category is mysteries. Mysteries are effectively side quests, but are much more organic in how they are presented to us in the open world, more akin to the likes of the stranger missions in Red Dead Redemption 2. As you explore England, you'll come across world events where NPCs will ask for your aid. There's a good variance in these mysteries, and they can range from something as simple as helping a child deal with accepting the loss of her father, to much darker mysteries where you uncover serial killers and more.
Burn it to the ground and it will not change me. Heathen, this is a place for proud converts like myself. I seek those who wish to join the great and superior holy path I am on. Yes, burn it down. Make a pyre of the past. Go ahead, destroy more. My faith cannot be broken. Thank you. Test my faith. Yes, go ahead, destroy it. See, take yourself. It doesn't bother me. You will soon change from your pagan ways. They are not mine, but God's. I have converted to God, and now I share all things.
Yes, you mentioned that. Curious, good man. What were you before you became so devout?
I was just like you, a stupid heathen, lost and violent. Speaking of which, you should try praying before it is too late.
Too late? For what? The eternal buckery you possess? And now you stand. I worry that stool is covered in shit. What is this?
Oh no, that's... I mean, that key. Do what you like with it. Throw it in the river. My faith will not budge.
This hut reeks, as if a battlefield. Corpses.
Unlike in other RPGs where side quests can feel long and uninteresting, each one is unique and memorable, and never tends to last longer than a few minutes, but are engaging enough every time that you would be cheating yourself if you didn't do them. Mysteries reward you with skill points, which you then use to level up Eivor's power level to unlock new skills. The third category is artifacts. Artifacts are probably the one I spent the least time investing in, as that's more your collectibles for those completionists out there. These can range from parkour challenges where you're chasing flying papers across trees and rooftops, to cursed symbols, which are pretty creepy when you stumble across them. Overall, the amount of side content in this game is enormous, and if you want a game that you can sink 100+ hours into, then you have that here with Valhalla. But even for someone like me, who prefers a straight guided main story arc, I constantly found myself getting lost in the world of Valhalla, as the side content was so interesting and rewarding that I never once simply went from point A to point B. But even on top of these three main categories of side content, there's even more again, but I will break them down separately as we go through Eivor's character as a Viking and as an assassin.
Come, brothers. Let's end this.
So the tagline that we have heard non-stop since Valhalla was announced is like a Viking, with Ubisoft promising to sell us the ultimate Viking experience in England, where we get to live out our Viking dreams. And I have to hand it to them, they have absolutely nailed it. Eivor's goal in England is to build his own settlement with his clan, and to do this he has to gain alliances and raid across England for resources. The settlement system isn't unknown to the Assassin's Creed franchise, as it was first introduced in Assassin's Creed 2 with the Monteriggioni, which you would upgrade throughout your playthrough. In Valhalla, the Raven Clan settlement is effectively the core of the gameplay experience as a Viking, as you use your resources you gain from raids to upgrade your settlement, which in turn allows you to upgrade your gear and also improve your settlement's economy and resources. As a Viking, Eivor has a signature longship, which you can equip with your own custom Jomsvikings to take with you on raids. Once you set out on the waters of England, you can raid monasteries and enemy fortresses simply by pulling up to the shore and sounding your horn. This will initiate a raid, where you and your clan will then storm the enemy fortress and loot the area for gear and currency. These raids are so much fun and really feel like the Viking experience as you set huts alight and open treasures with your fellow Vikings. The combat experience of Valhalla definitely feels a lot better than it looked in its promotional gameplay. Eivor is able to dual wield any two weapons of your choice. I predominantly used an axe and shield, as I found this the best way to handle large groups of enemies at once. Odyssey's combat felt fluffy and spongy, with all Cassandra's attacks being bombastic and the enemies being absolute level sponges. Thankfully, Valhalla does away with that system, and you can truly tailor Eivor to the gameplay experience that you want. Valhalla introduces a stamina bar, so you can no longer just spam the dodge button to evade enemies and swing frantically, as this will drain all your stamina and leave you wide open for a killing blow. Instead, Eivor is more like Bayek from Origins, albeit slightly flashier, where you have to rely on timings and parry in enemy attacks to deal a killing blow. There are a wide range of enemy types throughout the game, and you'll encounter new ones even towards the end game, which constantly kept the combat feeling fresh and challenging. Despite areas still having power levels as such, I was able to tackle areas with power levels more than 100 above me by simply timing my attacks right and not leaving myself open for a one-shot kill. I never once felt as if the enemies were damage sponges, and every enemy type had a weak point that if you targeted with your longbow would leave them open for a finishing blow. As a Viking, you can partake in the other iconic Viking activities too, such as drinking games and flighting. I didn't think I would enjoy the flighting all too much, and thought it would be much more of a tagged on experience. I actually found myself partaking in them whenever I could, not only because these rap battles were just jokes, but also because by doing it, it would increase Eivor's charisma, which would unlock more dialogue options for me to choose from in key moments of the story.
I do.
Foolish. Yet to be graced by her presence may balance the pain of the loss you will most assuredly suffer. Lady Elette, you are called to the field of flighting.
Ah, a peasant. Come for a
Take this.
A pittance, but I accept on the lady's behalf. She will begin.
I have heard much about you, and none of it good. You've the softness and brains of a sheep. My verses are known all across this great land.
For they put all who hear them to sleep.
Not bad.
Oh, you think you're so clever, I'm almost impressed that you managed to blurt something out. Yet I worry our skills are too deeply mismatched.
In the great art of flighting, I'm blessed.
Shameful performance, truly.
I should almost take pity on one so bereft of beauty, of wit, and of skill. But instead, I'll persist till you beg me to stop.
Lend a soul, for your words make me ill.
Where did you steal that one from?
Thus the Lady Elette has been beaten at last, by the one she was foolish to doubt. Now her herald must give me the sum of my bet, while Elette can but stand there and pout.
Ugh. Pay what is due and send this peasant away. I grow weary.
Of course, milady. Take your winnings, you have earned them.
Thank you.
One thing that I did not expect to see so much of in this game was the massive scale battles. Odyssey sold itself on the idea of having these massive scale battles, but they never really came to fruition, and then ended up being mostly forgettable. It seems Ubisoft took inspiration from For Honor for these sieges, as they are just as exhilarating as they were in that game. Each siege feels riveting and tense to carry out, as Eivor and hundreds of your men will engage in these large scale battles, pushing into enemy castles to claim that land. Each siege I did felt better than the one that came before it. That's probably the most surprising takeaway I've had away from this game. But how about the Assassin's experience? After all, this is an Assassin's Creed game. Well, thankfully, after holding my breath since its initial announcement, I'm happy to say that the Assassin experience in an Assassin's Creed game is actually good. Whereas Odyssey pretty much did away with anything that made it feel like an Assassin's Creed game, Valhalla embraces it. Early on in the story, you make acquaintance with Basim and Hytham, who are members of the Hidden Ones, who are the precursors to the Assassin's Creed. Their goals align with Eivor's, and you get to see Eivor don the iconic hood and hidden blade to carry out assassinations across the main story. But unlike in previous games, where the hood was more of an aesthetic choice, Valhalla integrates the hood as a core mechanic to the assassin experience. Certain areas of England are classified as distrust areas.
Best raise my hood here.
And in these locations, you must wear a hood to remain undetected. I absolutely love this feature, as it not only makes sense from a gameplay perspective, but also works perfectly with the established lore. When you're in these distrust zones, if you don't want to be spotted by an enemy, you have to walk through crowds using the social stealth and blend in with society to not be spotted. This feels like a mixture of the original Assassin's Creed formula, but mixed with IO Interactive's Hitman, which really brings to life that stealth experience that I love. Stalking enemies and figuring out your entry points and escape routes is just so Assassin's Creed and really brought me back to my childhood of playing Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. But how about the Hidden Blade? How does that work with the enemies having some form of level scaling? Well, thankfully Ubisoft incorporated two playstyles for you to choose from. The first is by having a time minigame for taking out higher level enemies, which will still insta-kill enemies, but only if you pass the minigame. This brings an extra level of tension to your assassinations, while still maintaining the Hidden Blade's deadly presence. The alternative option is to make it more like the classic Assassin's Creed, where the Hidden Blade is definitive one-hit kill if you're attacking from a stealth position. This is the option that I chose, as it's more in line with the Assassin's Creed I love, but also because playing the game from a stealth perspective is actually challenging enough on its own, as the enemy's cone of vision is pretty wide, and you can be spotted quite easily if you aren't playing with care. In terms of side content as an assassin, once you have built the Hidden One Bureau in your settlement, you unlock the Order of Ancients assassination menu. This was first introduced in Odyssey, but it didn't really have any depth or payoff to it. Thankfully here, it's actually a whole story arc in and of itself, that you have to investigate clues as to whereabouts of these hidden ones and track them down to assassinate them to uncover the leaders of the Order. There's an instant payoff with each assassination, as the memory corridor, which is a staple of the Assassin's Creed, has returned and gives you these intimate moments with these members you have assassinated. Once you've assassinated the final Order of the Ancients, the ending cutscene is so pivotal to the overall franchise, it's definitely worth seeing out. Another part of the side content that I would class as part of the assassin side of the game are the Animus Anomalies. These are absolute treats, and if you complete all of them, they will give you the true ending to the game. Animus Anomalies are essentially glitches and animus that allow Layla, who is our modern day protagonist, to enter the world of England in place of Eivor, to complete these trippy puzzles in the sky, which will unlock segments of a cutscene that are centric to the modern day plot. These puzzles were fun and allowed me to spend more time with Layla Hassan, as like with the other entries in this new trilogy, we don't spend a massive amount of time in the modern day. But before I move on to the story, I just want to quickly mention the soundtrack. The soundtrack in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is phenomenal. Jesper Kyd, who previously composed the soundtrack for Assassin's Creed 1 to Revelations, has been brought back in along with Sarah Sachner to give us a whopping 47 track score, which I think might just be my favourite soundtrack from the entire franchise. Each track evokes the themes being portrayed during key moments of the plot, and even subconsciously encourages exploration with its sounds of wonder and awe. Here's just a few snippets from my 3 favourite tracks from the soundtrack. So how does Valhalla fare with its story? Valhalla carries on directly from Odyssey, with Layla Hassan in the modern day searching for a way to stop the end of the world. To do this, Layla has to go back into the Animus, but this time through the eyes of Eivor, who, after a violent opening, sets out across England with his brother Sigurd and his Raven clan in search of a new home. The way that Valhalla approaches its main story is quite different to the previous titles. This is because Eivor can choose to tackle each region of England by pledging to it on the Alliance map, but in no particular set order. Now each region that you pledge to plays out like the memory sequences from the previous Assassin's Creed titles, but instead of being in a order that you have to follow through, you can tackle each region at its own pace. Each region has its own story arc in which Eivor will look to find an allegiance with its leader in that area so that they can help him take England. At first, I thought this idea seemed quite mundane and repetitive, but there's actually a surprising amount of versatility to each story arc, and it almost feels like watching an episode of a great Netflix show than it does a recruitment mission. And I think a lot of that comes down to the characters and writing. Assassin's Creed Valhalla sees Darby McDevitt return, who was the lead writer of my favourite Assassin's Creed, Revelations. And in Valhalla, the characters that have been crafted here are so well thought out and put together and have such engaging backstories that they really demand your attention and emotional investment with each cutscene. But there can be no great RPG without an exceptional main character to tie it all together. And I have to say that for myself, Eivor absolutely nails that. Ezio is still yet to be dethroned as the greatest assassin. I have to give it to Eivor. He comes really close for me, and I would be so happy if we could have another game with him. An RPG demands so much of your time, and if you can't relate with that main character, it all falls apart. Valhalla sees the return of dialogue options from Odyssey, and although I still don't really agree with it, at least the dialogue choices that you have make sense for the situation that Eivor is in and stay true to his character. Whereas Odyssey just felt like one extreme or the other, Eivor's dialogue choices have subtle differences but is still true to him as a character. Valhalla allows you to choose as to whether you play as male Eivor or female Eivor. I chose to play as male Eivor, as I loved the voice actor's work on the TV show The Last Kingdom as Canute, and I found I resonated more with his portrayal. However, if you want the canonical experience, make sure you choose Let the Animus Decide. So as I've mentioned, the main narrative driving the plot forward is Eivor's relationship with his brother Sigurd, as they try and find a new home and also live honourably so that they may enter Valhalla. I was pleasantly surprised by how much this game leaned into Norse mythology and wove it into the fabric of Assassin's Creed lore. Valhalla demands a lot of you to fully delve deep into Norse mythology and understand its lore and meaning to the Vikings. The end of this game raises a lot of questions for the future of Assassin's Creed, and I'm sure it will be divisive and discussed for months on end amongst fans. For myself, I found this a satisfying conclusion to not only this new trilogy of games, but also gave closure to previous entries in the Assassin's Creed franchise. Without spoiling anything, the conclusion to this game has layers, and it's not something that is given to you on a platter. And even though this should be a good thing, I found it slightly frustrating that I was left scratching my head not fully understanding what I just saw. It took me a few days to figure out what had actually happened in the conclusion, and I don't believe that's a fault of my own, but instead of a fault of the pacing and the structure of some of the content in this game that I was not advised to tackle prior to doing that final mission. Assassin's Creed has now been steered in a new direction to pave way for more titles in the franchise. And although the success of the next title depends on how well the mantle is passed from Darby McDevitt to the next writer, I feel that the original Assassin's Creed story from 2007 to 2012 in Assassin's Creed 3 has now been concluded in a satisfying way for fans such as myself to be at peace with. Assassin's Creed Valhalla has done something that usually fails, and that is creating a product that aims to appeal to everyone. Somehow, Ubisoft has achieved that with this game. You have the solid RPG with tons of exploration in a beautiful open world to lose hundreds of hours in. You have the Viking experience with an engaging Viking story with interesting characters and a brilliant main character to carry you through. And most importantly of all, you have the assassin experience, where after years of begging from fans, we see the classic Assassin's Creed experience return in an Assassin's Creed game. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a masterpiece, and a must-buy for anyone who enjoys video games. It has more than its worth in side content alone, and will appeal to anyone, even if you haven't played a previous Assassin's Creed game. Valhalla's only shortfall is its pacing towards the end of the game, which could leave some players clueless and frustrated at its ending. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching, TGFL out.